Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipsson. Welcome to episode 92 of Sports Management Podcast. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to thank everyone who voted for me in the Sports Podcast Awards. The results are out, and Sports Management Podcast won third prize in the sports business category. So thank you so much. Moreover, this episode is sponsored by InSport Education. The best way to elevate your sports career, except for listening to this podcast, is to take part in InSport Education's courses and programs. InSport Education is offering Sports Management Podcast listeners 10% off all of their courses with the code SportsManagementPodcast10. Click the link in the description below and elevate your sports business career today. Now, today's guest is Lou DePaoli, a sports business veteran who currently holds the role of President of Executive Search and Team Consulting at General Sports Worldwide. Lou started his career in the insurance business, but later transitioned into sports. He has worked for the New York Mets, Pittsburgh Pirates, and Atlanta Hawks, to name a few. He has an incredible memory, together with a love for numbers, which earned him the nickname Rainman. Get ready to learn why Lou wanted to fire everybody before taking a job with the Marlins, being called Mayor of Citi Field, the importance of fan engagement, the Collab with Marvel, and much more. Lou DePaoli, welcome to the Sports Management Podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. How are you, Marcus?
All well. It's a Friday night, Friday afternoon, so we're, entering the weekend here soon.
Yes, we're both getting ready for a big weekend, right?
Correct. And I'm really excited to talk to you. You are the president of the Executive Search and Team Consulting at General Sports Worldwide. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So what my vertical does at General Sports Worldwide is, as the title implies, it's Executive Search and Team Consulting. So, we do a bunch of consulting with professional sports organizations and leagues on how to run their businesses more efficiently. We also, at the same time, do a bunch of executive recruiting. So we place people in jobs. Our clients reach out to us and we place them with good people. What's not in the title is we also have a very robust training division where we'll do a bunch of sales and leadership training for, last year, I think we did 40 different organizations. We conducted some sort of training for over 115 days worth of training. And then we also own a career development platform called the Clubhouse, which is geared more towards entry-level people looking to get a job in sports, where we have about 140 mentors in the business who have raised their hands to say, you know what, I'd like to pay it forward and I want to talk to somebody else about being their mentor and helping guide them through the industry.
That's fantastic. And, we have talked a lot on this podcast about mentorship and networking. So the Clubhouse, that's a fantastic initiative. So General Sports Worldwide acquired the Clubhouse, right?
That is correct. We purchased the Clubhouse a little over a year ago. It was early March of last year. A good friend of mine and some of the members on my team, a gentleman by the name of Bob Hamer, founded the Clubhouse back in 2016 or 2017, had built a really nice business. And we were big fans and big supporters of Bob and the Clubhouse. But, life changed, COVID hits here in the States. It kind of hurt a small business person like Bob, who's got a wife and a family, and he needed to go get a real job. And we talked to him about maybe doing a few different things with him. And then I just said, how about we buy the Clubhouse from you? And he was like, that's a good idea. So, we purchased it because we're such big believers in the platform. It's a really great place for people in the early stage of their careers, not only to find a mentor, but we have jobs posted there. We have a ton of content. We record probably 3 to 4 webinars a week. There's sales training videos. There's just so much there for people really looking to get their start in a career, or if they are in a job and they want to learn how to get to the next job. that's a fun part of business for us. We really enjoy mentoring, and it's been a central part of my leadership over the years prior to joining General Sports.
Many of the listeners of this podcast are up and coming in their sports career, or maybe they just started out, or they need some help on the way. So how does it work with Clubhouse? Can anyone join, or how does that work?
Sure. So the website is theclubhousecareers.com, and anybody can become a member. If somebody wants to have access to the mentors and the webinars early, and like the live webinars that we do, there is a pro membership model. That is $7 a month, $7 US. So it's not anything that's overly expensive. We're not doing this to make a bunch of money. Really, it doesn't even cover our costs. But we figured that that's some premium content that people should pay for, and to show us that they're serious about really getting an opportunity to work in the sports business.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Going back to General Sports Worldwide, 4 pillars, I think I read that you have. You have athlete representation. You have your department, the executive search and team consulting. There is also sports team sales, mergers and acquisitions, and sponsorship brokering. And then now also the networking part.
Right.
So, with the representation, is that like, agency? You work as an agency as well?
Yeah. So we have a very large, athlete representation divisions here. One based in the UK that's focused on mostly soccer representation, but there's also, some rugby players. We just started a boxing division, which is proving to be pretty successful right out of the box. And then we also have some Olympians that were on the Britain's Olympic team in the past year. And then we also now have a division in the United States that is focusing predominantly right now on NFL. So we've gotten a few football clients, American football clients, and looking to branch out as we go along.
Yeah, that's good. So you mentioned that you're doing business in the UK, obviously in the US. You're working with, basically all the major leagues or brands, NFL, NBA, minor league baseball, Topgolf, NWSL. Are you in other countries as well, working with leagues in other parts of Europe or elsewhere?
Yes. So yeah, we've spoken to teams in the Saudi Premier League. We've talked to teams in Italy, in Spain. We haven't been able to secure any of those contracts yet, right? But we're slowly making inroads into those areas as well. So right now, predominantly our business from my vertical is North America. Yeah, I would say North America predominantly. We have someone on our team who's based in London. So he does executive search in London and across Europe. But right now, on the consulting side, we're trying to see if we can get into more of Europe and the rest of Asia to see if there's opportunities for us to grow our business that way.
That's really interesting. So it's truly worldwide.
Yes, it absolutely is. We've talked to everybody on every continent at this point. It is just a matter of trying to find the right fit. What's the right opportunity? Obviously, there's a desire for us to work with other organizations, and we can learn about the culture and learn about how things operate outside of the US, and then vice versa. We've had a lot of people reach out to us because they like the way the business operates in North America, right? That it's just a different climate, a different culture of how we go about things here, where I would say, especially when it comes to football and maybe other sports, that the technical side, on the sporting division side, Europe and the rest of the world is ahead of the United States, for sure. We just see it on the technical side. They're much better. Absolutely. The rest of the world is better than North America right now. But on the business side, we're probably on the upper edge.
It's an interesting fact to see the difference. Yeah,
absolutely.
So you have had an incredible career within sports. Before we, go through most of your career, you have worked for New York Mets, Pittsburgh Pirates, Atlanta Thrashers. So what was it with this job that you have now that intrigued you and interests you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's, this job allows me to take all of my experiences from my previous 28 years in sports of running sports franchises. And on the consulting side, I get a chance to share my experiences and best practices of what's worked, how to evaluate your staff, how to drive your business forward. I get a chance to share that with a lot of different organizations. And then for me, as a leader in my career, one of the things I think that set me apart and made, our organization successful is that we always built great teams on the business side, right? So we built a really good front office. I'd hire people in, we would train, we would develop, we built good culture. And on the recruiting side now for General Sports, we get a chance to kind of share that as well with our clients, that we know, if Marcus is looking for a specific senior level role, we really dig into what your culture is like, what the requirements of the job are. And then we know people pretty quickly who match that, that profile. So it's one of the reasons why we've been able to have so much success on the executive search business so quickly.
So that's very interesting with the team. The recruiting process is difficult, like how someone looks on their CV versus when you talk to them. You can never, it's a risk hiring someone to know if they will perform. So you said that the success was that you built great teams. How do you go on to find this great team?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the key for us when I was a leader running sports franchises, right, on the business side was, really finding the right culture fits and the people who have, the right personality, the right drive, and the right makeup. In most cases, depending on what level of role we were looking to fill, we could teach people skills. What we do on the business side, as I always say, that this is a line I used to use all the time, and I still say it, was like, what we do isn't rocket science, but what my job was chemistry, right? Is finding the right mix of people who want to have that career development mindset, who want to be good teammates and work together to drive that business forward. And that's what I really focused on. Every time I got to an organization, it was, okay, step one, let's evaluate the current structure and the current staff. Where do I see inequities? Where do I see opportunities? And then I would say, okay, let's start attacking the people part first. Because you need to have good people to build a good organization. And so we would always look at hiring people who met the culture first, and then people who had the right mindset of wanting to be someone who wanted to be part of a team, who were willing to be, for lack of a better term, scrappy, aggressive, but also, I used to use the term, people that had high ceiling. So I would hire Marcus maybe at this role today, realizing he probably could be here in a couple of years. Those were the people I was looking for, people who also had upside potential.
When I did research for this episode, I came across an interview that you said when you interviewed for the VP of sales roles at Florida Marlins, basically what you told them was that I want to fire everybody and start over. And was that for you, what we talked about now, that you wanted to build your own team and find this chemistry and you didn't just want to take something pre-made?
Yes. I mean, look, that is, and that's going back a long way. Good job unearthing that one, Marcus, because I started at the Marlins 27 years ago. And that was part of my job interview. I did tell them, because I was there for quite a bit on my interview. And I'll never forget, I told them, here's the two things I would do. I took a white piece of paper that was in front of me, and I wrote down step one was I would fire pretty much almost the entire sales department, because I'd gotten a chance to meet them all the day before, and they weren't very impressive. And then I said, step number two, here's how I would go about paying the staff. And I would change kind of your compensation model so that you could build a little bit more of an aggressive team. So whether you hire me or not, here's what you should do. And I gave them the piece of paper. And then the interview was over and I left. And then 4 days later, they called and offered me the job. And then when I got there, they already started clearing out some of the people because they knew I was coming. And then when I got there, we got rid of the rest of the staff and I kept 2 people. Actually, initially it was 3 people. It was the top salesperson, an intern, and my executive assistant. And my executive assistant and it didn't work. So we let her go a couple weeks later. And then I completely rebuilt the entire team and had everybody start on the same day in like November of that year, and did a massive onboarding training. Nobody even saw the office pretty much for the first week or 10 days. And then we got everybody in with the right mindset, the right culture, everything I talked about earlier. And we saw our attendance jump that year 36%. Like we built a great team, and a lot of those people have moved on to very high level senior roles in the sports industry.
That's great. That's what it's all about.
Right.
So many, questions on that as well. So you said that you met the team. You cannot get to know someone really deeply in such a short time. So what was it that convinced you so quickly that these people were not good enough for your team?
Yeah. So I was fortunate enough that when I was there for my interview, I spent a lot of time interviewing with the senior leadership team during the day. It was still during their season. It was right at the end of the season. And that night they had a game. So the Marlins had a home game. And then the next morning, I met with my potential boss again and the president of the team. And it was very well known that they were looking to bring in a new leader. So I asked, what is the sales team doing? I had time late in the afternoon and during the game. So I walked around trying to find out what the salespeople did. And during the day, I watched them in the office, literally sitting around, throwing paper airplanes at each other and goofing around. And then when I went to the game, I couldn't find any of the salespeople. So I asked this intern, the gentleman who we wound up keeping on board, I said, hey, you're out here working. I mean, it's hot in Florida, right? It's in Miami. It's September. He's out there sweating. I said, where is everybody? He's like, well, I probably shouldn't say, but they're all up in the press box. In the press box? What's the sales team doing in the press box? I went up there and they were up there playing cards, like literally playing cards with each other and goofing around. So I walked in, I asked a question. Of course, hey, do you want us to deal you in? I'm like, no, I'm good. Just curious, is this typically what you guys do? And how do you handle this? And, if someone needs me, I'm on a radio, they can reach me. But sometimes I turn mine off. And I just said, oh, okay. So right away, that's when the next morning I said, listen, you have to fire those people. They don't have the right mentality. I don't care if they're successful, but the only person I saw working was the top salesperson and the intern. Everybody else was literally sitting up in the press room, not even watching the game, playing cards and goofing around.
And that guy was probably the top salesperson for a reason in that team as well.
Correct. And he wound up going on to have a pretty good career himself.
My other question was regarding, you said that you changed the salary structure. So was that more of like a bonus system or, to encourage them to sell more, or what type of change did you do there?
Sure. So the one of my favorite expressions is, compensation drives behavior. And in our case at the Marlins, the reason they brought me in is they had seen their attendance and their revenues just go down every year. So I said, okay, if we want to change behavior, we need new people, we need a different structure, and we need to provide them a compensation structure that rewards them. It's highly incentivized. So again, this is 1996 in Miami, so they could still live on this. But we offered them a base salary of $1,000 a month, so $12,000, but very high commission rates. That would scale up. The better they did, the more they make. The percentages would go up. So all of a sudden, we had these people making, again, at that point, $150,000, $160,000 because they were selling so much. And the organization was more than happy to pay it out because all the incremental revenue they were bringing was 15 times that. Like I said, we grew our attendance 36% that year. The staff had a lot to do with that. They're the ones who were out there driving that incremental sale because we put that type of an aggressive compensation model in. Now, that was probably too aggressive. I had to adjust that over time, just because $1,000 a month isn't really enough for people to live on. But for that first year, that was the model I went with, and it worked.
That's interesting. From there, you moved on to be the EVP and CMO of Philips Arena, if I'm correct.
Yeah, so I left the Marlins and I actually went to be vice president of the NBA league office for 5 years. And we built a department that is called Team Marketing and Business Operations. It goes by the acronym TMBO, TMBO, and it is looked at as the gold standard in business consulting and sports leagues. And I was one of the first people they brought on to build this department out. It was Bernie Mullen, who's legendary in the sports business globally, headed up the department. And then it was myself, a professor by the name of Bill Sutton, and a gentleman by the name of Scott O'Neill. And we hit the ground running and started building out the entire structure, the systems, the philosophy. I mean, it was really a fascinating project to be a part of. And then I went from there to the Atlanta Hawks 5 years later when Bernie went there. Bernie Mullen, as I mentioned earlier, he went there as the CEO. He brought me down as EVP to kind of run the business side for him.
Yeah, and shout out to Scott O'Neill, also great book, Be Where Your Feet Are. I don't know if you have, I have it at home here. I've read it. It's a great book.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Scotty, look, Scott's great people, great leader, innovator, creative. Obviously, he's doing a lot of great things in his career.
Yeah.
And I consider him a friend. And we worked side by side, the three of us, Scott, Bill, and I for many years. And that was a good bonding relationship. But yeah, Scott's an author, he's a CEO. Now he's actually out of sports into the entertainment world.
Yeah.
And he's a force of nature.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, he's at Marlin Entertainment now, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was a side step there.
Yep, that's okay.
So yeah, and in Atlanta, you have also worked for Atlanta Thrashers, the 34th NHL franchise, which is not anymore.
Correct.
You had a similar role there as with the Hawks, right?
Yeah, so I oversaw, it was one role, so it was one parent company called Atlanta Spirit. And we had the Atlanta Hawks NBA team. We had the Atlanta Thrashers NHL team. And then we had the arena. Back then it was Phillips Arena. Now it's State Farm Arena. I was the EVP and Chief Marketing Officer at that time for those entities. And it was a lot. You have a lot going on when you have a hockey team, a basketball team, all the concerts, because Phillips Arena, State Farm Arena, is one of the best arenas in the country. And it's one of the top drawing venues in North America behind, Madison Square Garden in New York and Staples Center. Phillips Arena or State Farm Arena is up there pretty much to the top every year. So it was a fun environment to work in. And we loved living in Georgia. And I grew up in the Northeast here in the United States, in New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts. And to be in Georgia was really fun. But there was issues there with the ownership group that made it somewhat of a toxic environment. And, Bernie wound up leaving early before his contract was up. My contract was up 6 months later or 7 months later. And we just agreed, this just not working out. Unfortunately, I loved working there, but it was not a good environment. And that's when I went to the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah. The culture and the environment is important. Of course, if you're not happy there and you don't feel good, then you will not perform your best as well in business. It's the same with the players. It's the same for the, back office, of course.
Correct. It's the same thing. I mean, look, our team in the front office, we loved working together. Some of those people I've hired multiple times since, people on my team. They're some of my closest friends in the business. But the problem was, at the top, with the ownership group, it just really wasn't a fun environment from that perspective. And you could see that it wasn't an environment you wanted to work in any longer. And they were looking to cut costs. They were looking to get rid of the hockey club, which eventually they wound up having that team move to Winnipeg. So now that they are the Winnipeg Jets in the NHL now. And, they wound up having to sell the Hawks and they wound up getting out of sports altogether. But it was just, when you don't have, again, they always say everything starts at the top, right? The leadership from the top. One notch below, from the CEO, Bernie, on down, we thought we had great people, great culture. But when at the top, it's not there, it's just hard to sustain and keep people happy.
Of course. So how was the move from Atlanta to Pittsburgh?
It was great. One thing about Pittsburgh, for those who don't know, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in North America, is one of the best sports cities in this country. They love their sports teams. I mean, the Steelers, the Pittsburgh Penguins hockey team, Steelers in American football, Penguins in the National Hockey League, and the Pirates. But they also love their high school sports. They love their college sports. They live, eat, sleep, drink sports. And for someone who is a sports marketer and a leader in sports, it was a great opportunity to go into a market where the Pirates had been struggling for almost 2 decades. And to get a chance to work in an environment where we got a chance to build that business into a really thriving, successful business. At the same time, the team's performance got better just as I was leaving, and they finally made the playoffs. But it was a really fun 5 years that I was there. Enjoyed working with the ownership, enjoyed working with the other leaders. We built, again, a great team there. And then, I know they've had some struggles the last X amount of years on the business side and on the field. But when you work in a sports, really, what's the word I'm looking for? Like people that are really sports themed, sports centric marketplace, that's a dream, because all you have to do if you're a good marketer or a good leader is, I used to say, all I needed was to drop a match because the gas was already there and you could just ignite the fan base. And we turned around our fan base very quickly. Even though the team was still terrible, we were growing the business at an incredible rate.
In the interviews I've heard, there's a lot about fan engagement and everything, surrounded the game. Was that one of the most important factors you felt in your role?
Yeah. Look, step number one, I always told people was internal, making sure that people had a good culture and the right, internal structure, and that they felt good about their job so that the internal staff was engaged. Then once you can have internal engagement, then it became, okay, what about fan engagement? Right? That was literally the next step in our business plan, and the performance that I would build every year was, first thing, take care of people internally. Second thing, we gotta provide great fan engagement up and down the ladder, whether it was people interacting with our website, people coming to our games, people buying merchandise, people watching on television. You wanted to make sure that you were providing the most engaging content for them to feel like, yeah, you know what? That's going to give me a reason to maybe increase my fandom, or, give me an opportunity maybe to come to another game, or maybe I'll watch another game, or I'll tell my friends that, wow, they do some really fun things at the Mets or the Pirates or the Hawks. That's what always was one of the big key separators for us, and what got the organizations, and the fan bases to becoming engaged, was that we just took a different approach than what had been done in the past. And fans loved it. They ate it up everywhere we went.
Yeah, because you also had, with the Mets, you said, for example, you wanted to have the best food in MLB. Why was that so important?
So when I got to the Mets, the team had been struggling. You'd have the Yankees across town, 8 miles away are the New York Yankees, right? Arguably the greatest franchise in sports. Okay. So it was a tough comparison. Our team wasn't playing well. We had a new ballpark, you don't have a lot to celebrate. So I said, listen, here's what we're going to do. When the ownership at the time, when they built Citi Field, they did some good work on bringing in some good local partners and some famous chefs. So, but not enough people knew about it. I don't know if you're familiar with Shake Shack, the place where you can get hamburgers and milkshakes. It's really popular in North America. Their first ever sports venue that they were in was Citi Field for the Mets. Right? And we'd have lines down the concourse all night for people to get Shake Shack's food. So that's when I said, you know what, maybe we need to kick up this a little bit, and let's work with additional chefs throughout New York, the really famous ones who own some of the best restaurants. And we wound up creating great partnerships with them where they would bring their signature dishes into the ballpark. So you could have food from almost any famous restaurateur in Manhattan at a Mets game. And they would also create some signature dishes just for the ballpark. So now, again, that's the experience, that's the fan engagement, because, New York is a lot of foodies, people who love to just, hey, you know what? You guys have Mamafuku, which is David Chang, right? I mean, great chicken. You guys have Mamafuku at the ballpark? Yeah. Oh, I'm going to go to the game just to get a Mamafuku chicken sandwich. Okay, if that's why you're coming, that's okay, right? I didn't shy away from that. Or we did a partnership with Nas, the performer, right? He owns a chain called Sweet Chick. So, and I did chicken and waffles, fried chicken and waffles combined. We did a partnership with Nas to go out there and sell Sweet Chick in the ballpark, and it exploded. People absolutely loved it. Long lines every game. So it was a reason for people to come to the games on top of all the other entertainment we provided until the team got better.
So you actually saw increase in participation after you did these partnerships surrounding the food?
Yeah. I mean, we would see people who came to the games literally for the food. As I said earlier, they would come for the specialty beers that we were offering, like locally craft brews. People just thought, like, you know what? Again, New York, anywhere you go to bars and restaurants, you always pay a heavy cover charge. I had people literally tell me, like, I look at the cost of the ticket as my cover charge. So I could come here, I could walk around. We had very wide concourses. You could walk around the entire ballpark on the lower level and still see the field at all times. So you could walk, hang out, stop and talk to your friends, meet a group of people, drink a couple of drinks, have a couple sandwiches, grab some ice cream, and then still be at a ball game. So we really, really leaned into that for the first few years I was there. And then, look, the team started to get better, and then we started to not be so good. You know, it's the life cycle of a sports franchise. And, you know, but those were the things that we did to try to differentiate ourselves. You have to provide people a reason to come to a game. Because at the end of the day, Marcus, if you rely on the team being good, right, at the end of the day, that's just a zero-sum game. You know, you flip the coin enough times, you're going to get half the time heads, half the times tails. In this case, some years are going to be good, some years are going to be bad. And that's not a way to build a business. So we looked at fan engagement as a priority to make sure that people had fun. Like they came to a Mets game or a Pirates game or a Hawks game and had fun. Then you could always come back and have fun, right? But if you came to come see the Mets win and we didn't, well, what are your odds of coming back? That was the way we always looked at it.
That's a good point. And of course, like you cannot always win. So you win the fans through the fan engagement. And on the same topic, I read that you noticed at Citi Field that the fans were reacting positively to superheroes when it showed up.
Yeah.
And then you leveraged on that. So how did you pick up on that? And what idea, triggered in your head?
Well, it's interesting. So I was never a huge superhero fan growing up, but, I did read some comic books and was familiar with Spider-Man and whatever. And I remember seeing some people on social media, Mets fans, like specifically in some of the Mets threads, always referring to Spider-Man, right? So Spider-Man happens to be from Queens in the comic books, and the ballpark, the Mets, are from Queens. So then I was like, I got to look into this. And we reached out to Marvel, and they basically said, hey, no way. Like, we're not going to do anything with you. You have to pay us to do business with us. That was our first foray. And then when we brought up one of our players, a guy by the name of Noah Syndergaard. So Noah, his nickname was Thor. He's 6'6", 260 pounds, long blonde hair, right? Throws 100 miles an hour. All of a sudden, it was like, you guys have Thor. Okay, like this is kind of cool. So we went back to Marvel and we did a Noah Syndergaard as Thor from the comic books with Marvel. That was like one of their first ever times. Actually, it was the first ever time they let a human or an athlete be on a bobblehead as one of their characters.
All right.
Yeah. And then we did more and more and more. Now I see that they're doing one this year, I think, with the Black Panther and maybe Starling Marte. Like, and the thing is, like, Marvel's headquarters are in New York. A lot of them turned out to be Mets fans once we met with them. And we'd asked them for their input. And then the first time we gave one of those away, there was lines down the street 5 hours before the game started. People waited in line because they wanted this Marvel item that was also Mets branded. And it just became and we wound up selling the game out. It turned out to be this big thing to have these Marvel products. So we wound up continuing a partnership with Marvel. And then they've expanded, their partnership with a lot of other clubs in other leagues too.
Can you see that partnership with Marvel to also expand your fan base? That people who are Marvel fans and they, read the comic books and they are into the superheroes, but they're maybe not a big baseball fan, that you might transfer some of them into baseball?
Yes, absolutely. We saw from our data that there was a lot of new fans coming to the ballpark who had never been before. That they were honestly coming because they were Marvel fans and they enjoyed what we were doing. So it was one of those things where it made a lot of sense. And then we started taking that concept into other verticals to say, who else is out there, right? Marvel was the best example, especially with Spider-Man, being from Queens, and Captain America being from Brooklyn, both New York City guys. And then we also had a different attempt with DC with Batman. One of our pitchers, just as I got there, was a guy named Matt Harvey, who was phenomenal for a short period of time. And we started promoting him as kind of like a Batman-ish character. And we got in trouble for it because there were some trademark violations, obviously. But that's what kind of opened up the door really at first for us to think about, well, what about Marvel? What if we went to them directly versus DC? And would there be an opportunity? And ideas, take sometimes to germinate. And sometimes you get told no first, but then eventually they said yes. And it's led to a very big, opportunity for them to branch out into sport marketing to gain even more fans for Marvel. So if you can run a trailer for the next Avengers that's coming out or the next movie in front of 40,000 people and put it out on a team's social channels and reach millions, that might actually help them sell more tickets to their movies. So it turned out to be a really great partnership that we appreciate. You've done a lot of great homework here, Marcus, and finding that out, because that was really one of the things on our team. Our person who was our head of marketing at that point, a gentleman by the name of Mark Fine, was really kind of the driving force on that. He and I had a couple conversations, and he ran with it and made it happen. And now he's the CEO of National League lacrosse team in Las Vegas. So that's why I said we hire good people, we train them, right? They move on. That's one example.
Awesome. The collabs in general in sports, I feel, is very interesting. And, it's very often, as you said, a win-win situation. If you do a collab with a brand that is not directly in what you do, but still, you have some type of connection,
right?
Then both parties can, expand their fan bases.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we did the collabs with the food. We did the collabs with, someone like Marvel. We also tried it on some street apparel with some apparel companies, right? I mean, people that aren't traditionally in sports. So we tried a lot of different things to broaden that fan base. And also the pitch or the value proposition for the potential collab partner was that we could also bring you and your products to a new audience.
Exactly.
Right? Because they weren't in sport. And generally they're like, oh, that's interesting. And if you could find the right people and build that partnership, we had a lot of success that way.
I'm sure. And talking about numbers, statistics, I know that you're a numbers guy.
Yep. Yes, I am.
The numbers don't lie, right?
Numbers don't lie. You can only expect what you inspect. And I'm a big believer in, my nickname that was given to me by then Commissioner David Stern of the NBA. He always used to just call me Rainman, in a nice way, because he knew when we met as a group that I had this recall for numbers. I didn't need the sheets in front of me. I could recall numbers and be extremely accurate as to what the numbers were. And he'd look around at other people and he'd be like, okay, Lou, what were the numbers back? And what were their, and I would say, it was about X. And it maybe right around here, someone would look him up and go, he's exactly right. So Dave was like, okay, you're Rainman. That's impressive. When you pay attention to the numbers, they just stick. I'm lucky that I'm that type of person. But if you're going to be a business leader or a leader in general, you need to know your metrics. You need to know your numbers, because at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to build profitability, and you've got to know where you're going, where you're heading, where you've been, what your costs are. And, again, I could go deeper into analytics and things like that, but I love numbers. So yes, I am a numbers guy, Marcus.
Yeah. And the first thing I read again, that the first thing you did in the morning, you pulled the numbers from the day before, you build your own databases, and so you just built up this huge database in your head with all these numbers, and then you made educated decisions based on those numbers, I assume.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, look, years and years ago, before there was a term for it, right? I was our database architect. I was our database analyst, because I loved on the back end for my sales team, I would build them and provide them the tools to make them successful using whatever technologies were available at the time. And then as I got into more of a senior level role, I built in Atlanta what most people consider the first business analytics team when I was in Atlanta with the Hawks. And then I built one with the Pirates, which is the first time they had done it. And I built one with the Mets, which is the first time they had done it. Because I'm a big believer and you have to know the numbers. And part of I don't know what interview you heard that from, but that's literally true. The first thing I used to do at all of those organizations is when I showed up first thing in the morning and I was in early, was I would pull up whatever dashboards, reports, ticketing system, like whatever I had access to at that point to get the data, to pull up the data from the day before, see where we're going, how are we on plan? Wait, what happened here? I could quickly then ask my team, what's happening here? How's this going? If you need my help here, let's talk about this. Let's maybe change direction. And it was just how I started my day first thing in the morning.
Yeah. We talked about when you building your team and have a strong team and you leverage the data. We've talked about that. Some of the people that have worked with you had also talked in interviews and said that at the Mets, you were like called as the unofficial mayor of the field, that everyone knew you. You greeted everybody and you treated everyone the same, even if they were an executive, if they were a plumber or a cleaner, that you treated everyone the same and created this great environment.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, look, it's that's just who I am. I've always been a people person. I've always had this ability, not only with numbers, but I can remember names and faces and people's backgrounds. And I just felt like I've always felt this way, that I would want everybody to feel they're part of the team, right? Where I don't need to just talk and deal with the owners. I don't need to just talk and deal with my peers or my team. I knew everybody in the organization, even the people who worked game nights, the ushers, the security staff, the part-time plumber, like whomever it was, the head electrician, like I knew everybody. When you add that up, on my team, in the front office alone, there was probably a little over 300 people. And then when you add in all the part-time, day of games, seasonal, it was thousands. There weren't many people I didn't know. And I would walk around during the game. And as I said earlier, I really believe it's about internal, like taking care of your internal people first to make sure they're engaged before they can provide great service. So I made sure, to the best of my ability, I knew our team, they felt valued, and then I knew that they would go out and do a better job. But I could probably still today walk around PNC Park in Pittsburgh or Citi Field in Queens, New York, and know most of the staff. And I could walk up, I know exactly where their posts are. I know who they are. I know their family stories. I can ask them, hey, how have you been? They'd be like, what's going on? Good to see you. That's just who I am. But I think it's really strategic to know who your people are, what makes them tick, let them feel valued from a senior level of the organization. Then they're going to give you that extra 10% that you might need. Or when we ask them, hey, we know we just played in baseball, we just played 12 days in a row. I need you here because we now have a concert in 2 nights and we're going to be putting in 18-hour days. They're like, oh, you know what? I'm in. Like, I'm good. Okay, let's go. Versus, these guys, they're always just asking me. They never give back. We gave back, and I got to know everybody really well. And yes, there was a feature that was on major MLB Network, Major League Baseball's television network, that was called, the Mayor of the City, and that was me.
Yeah, that's impressive. First of all, just to remember all the names. And I guess that's both because of a good memory that you have, but also that you take an interest in the employees of the team. So putting those two together, and that created a winning formula that everyone was happy. And of course, as you said, when you're an executive and you have an intern or someone who is new, it's a little bit scary. I can vouch for that when you talk to like a senior executive and you're just starting out. If they come up to you and they greet you and they know your name, that feels good. Just the small things like that can, make a difference.
Yes, absolutely. That's been my philosophy, Marcus, for my entire career. And I just feel like we're all in the same team, right? If you're in the same organization together, you all have the same goal, whether you're an intern or the owner, right? We want to build a good business and we want people to feel valued and engaged. So why not get a chance to just say, hello, how are you? Get to know their name. It doesn't take much.
It doesn't.
So that was me. I was the mayor, I guess, if you want to call it that.
The mayor. Yeah, I like that. As we have said, you have had a long career in sports. You actually started out in insurance, right? And then transitioned into sports. So
yeah,
with this experience, what would be your best advice for an aspiring sports manager or someone who wants to work in sports?
look, I think hitting on a lot of the things we talked about earlier, right, is that yes, you may have skills, but really what's going to determine your career path more than anything is being a good team player, contribute to the culture, like make sure you're in a winning environment, or if not, help build a winning environment, and then build a network. Don't be afraid. And I used to tell interns this as well, like, don't be afraid to come knocking on my door to get 5 minutes of my time or a half hour of my time. Get to know the other leaders in your organization, in other organizations, build your network, because it's a global, massive enterprise, sports. But for the people who are actually working in the front offices, it's not that many people. So it's easy to get to be known. And it's easy for me to say, hey, you know what? Marcus was an intern on our team. He did a great job. We don't have room for him right now. I'm going to recommend him to my friend who works in a different organization, in a different market, to help give you a job. Happens every day, right? So that's what I tell people is really come in with the right mindset, an open mind, like be flexible, because, to get your foot in the door in sports, you're going to have to do a lot of different things. Very rarely do you come in as, my first job was a vice president. That was my first job in sports, was a vice president of a minor league hockey team. But at that point, I'd already been a business owner, right, in the insurance business. So my background's a little bit, atypical. But for most people, get in the door, do what you have to do, try to find the organizations that really value development, for your personally and professionally. And then, the sky's the limit for anybody from there. And then at that point, you can learn the skills. It really isn't that difficult.
How important would you say that education is? Like have an official education?
Yeah, look, it's very important. Obviously, you need in the US, in North America, you need to at least have your undergraduate degree from a 4-year university. I'm a big fan of education. I really push people to go get your master's degrees, whatever, because it's going to make you that much more of a well-rounded executive down the road. Now, that said, if you graduate with a degree in history and then you get your master's in finance, you still might be starting off in the same role as somebody else. That education might be the separator down the road because you have a little bit more knowledge, maybe a little bit different experience, and you have more avenues that you can go down. So I think it's very important.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Has there been any bumps on the road in your career? And if so, how did you overcome them?
There's a lot of bumps. I mean, when you talk about the organizations that I worked for, all of them, when I started there, were in some sort of crisis mode, right? So you walk in the door and it's not good, So I have to come in and figure out and assess quickly, okay, what do I need to do? Yes, this is tough. Maybe there's tough decisions you have to make on personnel, like I said, in Miami or other places where you have to move people out or move them over or, start bringing in new people. But there was a ton of good teams. I was on a couple of good teams. When I was with the Marlins, we won the World Series the very first year I was there in 1997. But if people remember, what happened immediately after we won the World Series, we traded everybody away. We got rid of all the top players and wound up fielding a team the next year that had the worst record in baseball. So you went from being the best team to easily the worst team in a span of a few months. And you had to learn at that point, for me, managing my team was, how do I stay positive? And how do I keep them positive? Because they're all like, oh, this is terrible. I finally got a chance to really be a part of something and they ripped it out from us. So, there's a lot of those type of examples where, you have a lot of bumps in the road, but the key is maintain the positive attitude, try to see the forest through the trees, right? Just try to keep a level head, talk to some people that find mentors, find other experienced leaders, find people who also will be positive. you have to be realistic. I'm not out there Pollyanna, oh, it's always so great, but you also have to be realistic. But you have to keep that positive attitude of, okay, well, yes, this is another hurdle. How do we get over this? Like, how do we overcome this and build? How do we grow from here? What do we learn? Because if you don't learn from the mistakes, you're going to make them again.
Yeah.
Right. So that there's been, we could probably have another hour, Marcus, where I could talk about, just bumps in the road from one or two of the organizations alone. But those are probably the key highlights that I think people need to know when they face bumps in the road in their careers.
Yeah, I like that. And it's a common quote is you win or you learn. So as you said that, you learn from your, hurdles, from your mistakes, from your bumps. So
absolutely.
Then you take that with you.
Yes, no doubt.
Yes. Is there something I haven't asked you yet that you would like to mention?
No, you've done a great job. You did a lot of research, which I appreciate. I mean, you even went back to the insurance business, which I haven't had anybody ask me about that in a long time. But no, I think you've done a really nice job here. And I think that in our conversation, hopefully people could get a flavor for, what my leadership style has been, kind of what we're doing at General Sports, and then how others can get into the sports business and have successful careers as well.
I hope so too. So before I let you go, the last question that I ask everyone, and it's a sales referral question. It's who do you think that I should talk to next on this podcast?
Well, that's great. And I love the fact that you said it's a sales referral question, because that's what it is, right? I believe you're already going to speak to one of my teammates here, Travis Apple.
Yes.
Probably in a few weeks, right?
Yes.
So I got to take him off the list, right? I would have Travis, because he's great. He has his own podcast as well, as you know.
Yes. 52 Weeks of Hustle, I think it's called, right? Yeah.
52 Weeks of Hustle.
Yeah.
Travis is someone who started his career with us when I was in Atlanta. So he was on our team. He came up in our culture. And then now he's taken it to a whole nother level and is just one of the best in the business. But a referral. So I'm not dodging the question. I would say someone who was with me at multiple stops. I brought this person in Atlanta. I brought him to come into our team in Pittsburgh. And then I brought him into my team at the Mets. Is a gentleman by the name of Chris Zaber, Zaber. Chris is now the Chief Revenue Officer for the Pittsburgh Penguins hockey team. He is one of the best in the business. Someone who has a phenomenal background and track record of developing people, great mentor. And there's a reason why I always wanted him on my team, because we were in lockstep with what the approach was. And, obviously now he's doing great things with the Pittsburgh Penguins and trying to build out their, franchise as they're getting to the end of their run, I think, there with, Sidney Crosby and Malkin and the rest of that group, where they need someone like Chris to make sure that they still have the right business plan moving forward. And that's part of the Fenway Sports Group, folks at the Red Sox, et cetera. So I would recommend Chris Zaber. And Zaber, if you're listening, you probably knew I was going to call you out on that one.
That's great. And thank you so much. It's a great name. I hope I can make that happen with Chris as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And if you need any help, you let me know.
Will do. Lou DePaoli, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Sports Management Podcast.
So, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Marcus.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @sportmpodcast.